Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Patriots Table. Going to kind of do a part two from last week's episode. We talked about generational trauma and want to kind of run into masculinity and what that kind of plays a part with trauma and stuff too. I think this is another one of those topics, Ravi, where we could probably talk a couple hours about
Yeah,
this. But I think I think it's really important to hit one of the very early things with men because there's so many different things nowadays, especially in America, on masculinity. You got your toxic masculinity, you got the Andrew Tate type thing about what masculinity is, and then
mhm,
you got the feminists that think all masculinity is toxic, masculinity is just a bad thing overall. You got, what the more religious people think is masculinity, which so I there's just so many. Masculinity is such one of those just loose terms now. It could mean 100 different things, right? So I want to start from childhood on where where we're going wrong as a society with masculinity. And I would say one of the first things is as a young boy, you're taught to, at least in America, you're just taught to man up and you're not allowed to feel anything. Like that's such
mhm.
a common thing, the whole tough as nails, don't show emotions, you're not allowed to cry. And I mean, I just think that the psychological damage that's doing to a young boy being told that you're not allowed to feel in this way, this kind of ties into that trauma thing and even generational trauma, um, of you're essentially denying a part of who you are. Like you're learning to hate yourself. You're learning to hate your emotions, and that you're not allowed to feel anything. I mean, that's called masculine. It's called masculine. It's called being a man. You got to be tough. You got to be strong. And we wonder why so many men are on have to have their alcohol in the evening or have their coping mechanisms because they're not even allowed to feel anything and suppress that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a bad place to be in because, men without empathy can be a problem in society, families, and, in general with interactions with other people as well. Because they don't, excuse me, they don't feel anything, right? And like you said, they've been told not to feel it. And I think part of the problem also is that society is pushing back on what we, again, I mean, this is like you said at the beginning before we started. I mean, we're talking for two generations, right? So, and it's gotten worse, and I can see that because in our generation, we were not so much. I mean, the feminist movement was starting to form, but I don't think it was like in full force. But I think that had some role to play in this process as well. I mean, I think so because the when the women don't value or accept or accept that the man could have emotions or like that part of the person is shut down, and then they came up and they are now taking over the role of the male, right? And I think that kind of happened after the First World War because when the men went to war, the women stayed at home and pretty much did what the men did. So the men came back, and all of a sudden, they kind of lost. Uh, Someone once said, I mean, like, men think in boxes, like, they have the work box, family box, and, all that kind of, I mean, like, when those things mix, men don't do very well. So I think that's kind of where it started. And I don't think it got any better because then the next generation that came up, did exactly what you said. And I think we talked about the generational trauma effect last time. And even though it may have stopped, people are still carrying that generational trauma from generation to generation. And if somebody doesn't break it, then we have this situation where the masculinity or toxic masculinity or whatever you want to call it gets worse with each generation. And now we have people who really don't know. what a man needs to do or be, and they substitute the male position in the family unit or societal unit with things that make them feel like they're doing something big or something better, and those are not necessarily things that need to be done for the unit to work properly. I think that's kind of what needs to be discussed in terms of like what is happening. I mean, what exactly is going on with men and what the outcomes are. Because a lot of the times, like when the men cannot, the young men especially, I mean, if you look at, I don't think it's just America. I mean, I think it's a global issue. If you look at the young men, I mean, they don't know how to be a protector, a provider. I mean, these are the traditional male values. They have no idea. And then, at the end of the day, this gives them some form of like mental instability. And now you have a mental health issue, starting to rise up. And then on top of that, of course, all over the world, we are confused about our genders, gender roles and genders as well. That doesn't help. Uh, Men wanting to be women and vice versa. So that's what I see as the issue here. I mean, like it's a big problem. It's someone needs to take the stand and break the cycle, and then raise a generation of boys who know what it means to be, in a good sense, the proper level, proper form of masculinity in them, and tell them that they don't, it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be, you have to be empathetic. You don't need aggression for everything. I mean, like this kind of stuff. I mean, like you don't need to drink to be a man. I think that needs to happen. And how that's going to happen is a good question. And I don't know. This is your generation, so what are your ideas?
Well, I mean, the first thing is realizing what's going on. You have to bring a awareness to the hows and whys. I mean,
Yeah.
what I call it is you essentially have grown men walking around with what I like to call emotional constipation. You
Mhm.
have all these bottle up emotions that you are told we're not allowed to have, are not acceptable, and contrary to people's beliefs, those don't go away. You will store those in your body, whether you're conscious of it or not. The soul can manifest itself in health issues, physically and mentally. Um, but I mean, what does that look like as you get older? You can have a man who's depressed, has a drinking problem, drug problem, who's disconnected from reality, from his wife, his kids, all these different things that can manifest itself, and then what happens if eventually the top's going to blow, right? Eventually
Yeah.
you're going to have to feel something, and you, unfortunately, I think that's why we see so many domestic violence cases going up as time goes on, as the millennials and even, the next generation down is getting older. Men are just getting more and more violent
Mhm.
because of the essentially what I believe is more suppressed emotions, because you're not allowed to. It's a sign of weakness in today's society for a man to feel, for a man to cry, to be sad. I mean, what is anger? Anger is a shield for sadness. And then we use control as a cover for fear. You're
Yeah.
scared of yourself, you're scared of your own emotions, so you have to control the situations. You have to get angry because you're sad. And as a man, you're not allowed to be sad, but you're allowed to be angry. And in a lot of beliefs, it's better to be angry. It's manly to be angry. It's get to raise your voice, and it's encouraged to put people in their place and have your road rage and be stern at work. Like that's a sign of strength in society today, and it's a mask for the other emotions that we were told are weak for a man to have. And this is all stuff you're supposed to learn how to regulate as a child. And your parents are supposed to teach you how to regulate those emotions and how to figure
Yeah.
that out. It's so much harder to figure that out as an adult. It's as a child, what do you really have responsibilities do you have as a child? Eat, drink, use the bathroom, and maybe school, right? The rest of the time you're getting to do what you want to do for within reason with your life. So you would have plenty of time to sit there and figure out these emotions and learn, hey, if I have these emotions, the world's going to keep on going and everything's going to be okay. You have
Mhm.
grown men who feel like if they have fear, that it's not going to be okay. They are not safe. They are not going to be okay if so they have to control the situation. So all these emotions that we bottled up just this is all stuff that needed to be taught literally before 10 years old. A lot of this stuff should have been taught and learned at a very, very young age when you're honestly primed to learn this stuff. Like you're
Mhm.
you're you're a child wants to learn these things. And now you
Yeah.
have men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s still trying to figure this out. You have failed marriages, failed relationships with their kids. Their kids don't want to have anything to do with them
Hmm.
because they're bitter and they've
Yeah.
destroyed those relationships too. I mean, I don't know if there's any more from your end on what you saw even on where you grew up and in your generation, but that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're right, and the thing is, in our generation, like we most of these things we learned by observation. So my father didn't have to sit me down and explain to me what masculinity was, because I mean, that generation, my father knew what it was to be a man, and I have seen him cry. I mean, there was a time period as a child when you can and you're at home. And of course, in my culture, you stay at home till you almost get married. So it's not like you're kicked out of the house at 18. So you get all this, you know, age, several decades to observe your dad and have a relationship with the man. And I'm going to say quite honestly, I mean, not everybody had that opportunity. I mean, there were plenty of times that, there were people who had abusive, fathers, and they would beat them up. And, and back in the day, I mean, nobody got arrested for that, right? So there was alcohol abuse. I mean, there was not so much drug abuse because drugs probably, were not that prevalent back where I was. Things are different probably now. But there was like, physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse. I mean, like there was all these abusive people, but the majority were people who understood what it was to be the head of the house, the man, taking care of things, and when he couldn't, let somebody else take care of it. I mean, so there was this time that we could observe this stuff, and so that's how we learn. I mean, I've seen my dad, go in the kitchen and cook, and like when my mom was sick, he would cook and he wash dishes and do things like that as well. So like I grew up seeing that, and this is how So now I am that way. I don't have a boy to teach to. I mean, both my kids are girls, but that now that I have learned it, I could pass it on. But the problem is people who see the opposite end of it, and their parents are not somebody that they can observe and learn. I mean, maybe their dad was an alcoholic and, would come home and beat the mom up every night. That kind of situation. You're not going to observe and learn. So that child is not going to learn, and it's not part of the curriculum. So now the child turns to society to learn what it is. And society is not, geared to do that, right? I mean, you talk to the wrong person, you're gonna get the wrong advice for sure. And this is how a lot of kids, get into gangs. I mean, they start taking drugs and end up in jail and all this stuff. And like you said, I mean, that leads to a cycle that becomes, repeated generation after generation. That's how that's what my experience was, and I could see it, in the next generation, kind of slowly disappearing. And because my first child was born in 1996, so that you know that when it came to that level, I mean, the feminist movement was completely in full swing, and I think women have a role to play too, because the men may not come out and say it, but they do depend on the women to sort of guide them in a subtle way. So if you kind of write off your man, and one of the things that I see so much on social media, and now that we have social media, and I do remember hearing this as well, when there was no social media. That's how old I am. uh, it basically was like, like all men were subjected to the same standard. I mean, they would say like all men are pigs, or all men are like this, all men are like that. You couldn't trust any man. So like basically, when you do that, you're pretty much pushing that man into a corner, and that is not going to go well. So now
Or
this man is,
children, you're telling your
yeah,
children, your young boy, impressionable young boys, that
yeah,
they're pieces of crap before
yeah.
they ever do anything.
Right. Before they do anything. I mean, so the yeah, the condemnation of masculinity from society and the movements that were around, I think played a big part in that, on top of the generational trauma and the various, socioeconomic issues that people had back then. Because, if you, and now we have an additional problem, because, if society defines the genders properly, like masculinity, I mean, like, the masculine gender, then masculinity becomes part of that construct. And we are now slowly being, that's eroding as well, and which is not helping at all, because now the gender roles are kind of fluid. So society is now defining the gender roles as fluid. So now, the men are kind of, even more lost, because they don't have they don't have the social construct to fall into. Like, they know that this is what I should be doing, even though this is what I'm doing. So there is no room to heal in that environment. There's no room to come out and like learn it. I mean, like, who's going to teach them, right? I mean, maybe our generation could, people of your generation that have healed from that trauma could, but that's not who's trying to heal them. There's, professional people in the mental health area that I don't think know this.
Or just as wounded themselves. I
Yeah,
mean, if you really
yeah,
think of it, you have the extremes on both ends.
yeah.
You had men, you had women who were essentially wounded. You
Hmm.
had mothers that were, like you said, either, physically abused from alcoholics, or, essentially damaged women who never healed, that really kicked off some of this stuff in the and I think the start of the feminist movement was just. I mean,
Hmm.
women should have just as many rights as men.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't want to come across like I'm not for that, but what kind of took over the feminist movement was this unhealed hate of men, and
Hmm.
not even masculinity, but just we hate men. So there's the extreme on the other side. And then what did men do in response? You have this quote unquote masculinity that came up, that, is this is what it is to be man, and I call it false masculinity. And what false masculinity
Yeah.
is rooted in is what essentially it is. It's dominance, power, and silence. You look at years, this is really rampant in people like the Tate brothers. You even see in a lot of narcissistic male role models and influencers out there, that it's all about dominating your woman, getting
Hmm.
respect, having power over there, and silencing anybody who doesn't agree with you. And what what is that? That's all three of those are rooted in fear. You have the the extreme on the other side. You have pretty much unhealed people who are being defined by their trauma and their past experience, whether that be generational or their own. And you have women who are going, we hate men, and you have men going, we're going to control and dominate and silence women. And that's essentially what the false masculinity is. Like, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, it's not masculine. And you even think back to colonial times. I mean, one thing that I think that you saw a really decline in just masculinity and men in general is when you stopped hearing stuff like honor. And men used to have duels to the death over their honor
yeah,
getting smudged. There was a sense of pride and responsibility for, being a man and what that meant. I'd say true masculinity is rooted in courage, responsibility, emotional intelligence, and protection of others.
yeah,
And that's not really talked about nowadays. And if you do talk about it, you get put down by the people who are pushing this false masculinity thing because it means you have to put others before yourself. And what is that false masculinity? What's that dominance? You're feeding your own ego. I have to make myself feel good. I have to put others down to make myself feel good, including other men that you think are
yeah,
weaker than yourself. You see that in the fitness industry. It's rampant among men. If there's somebody who's smaller than you, well, maybe not as in shape as you, that just gives you permission to put them down and make yourself feel better about yourself. It's all rooted in that. It's that control and cover for your own fears and insecurities, and it's not masculinity at all.
yeah. You have, I mean, like, so the trait of like dominance, I mean, I think we have to define it a little bit carefully and like, make sure that you know what we're talking about. I mean, it's the toxic part comes from the uncontrolled need for dominance because dominance is built into the male DNA. I mean, because back from the caveman days, I mean, we had to have that dominant streak in order for the protective duties that a man had to do in that era, right? And that pretty much comes in, along with the package. So I mean, that's engraved in our DNA. What is happening now is that I think there was a whole like one or two generations now that have been shown or told that they are entitled to things. I mean, I call these the entitlement generation. I mean, this is not just masculinity, but broadly speaking about everything. But on the masculinity front, if you're told that you're entitled to have a certain things, from not just a relationship like a family, even society or a job or whatever, right? Now that is the problem because now at the kid as a kid you grow up, you see that certain people do certain jobs, and even in this country, I mean, like if you take for example a man and a woman doing the same job, the woman gets paid less. So there's all these inequalities that's kind of crept in there as well. So this consistently feeling entitled to this, to be something or somebody is what I think causes most of the problems in especially a family unit or, a unit where there's people involved, society, group or whatever, where one person takes, feels that he needs to be the dominant person and then puts everybody else down. And that's what you were just talking about. That's not a good place to, for a true, a male with, real non-toxic or whatever, good masculine traits. That's not one of them. Uh, and the other thing is like, showing because, in a relationship, you have to, and sometimes we kind of, and this is not like all the time, but, if you can catch yourself, you got to stop. And this happens a lot. I've seen it, I've heard it. Uh, like you said, that dominant entitled trait comes out, and then you want to put somebody down. and then, for example, say like, well, I can do this better because I'm a man. I mean, I can do this better is fine, but when you add that last bit to it, uh, that's a problem. That's not what is supposed to be, in a unit. Uh, does that kind of make sense with what you just said?
No, absolutely. I mean, you could essentially put dominance or control. I mean, dom men, it's like you said, it's in our nature to conquer, whether it be conquer nature, conquer our yard and make it immaculate, as a man, like it's just to go and conquer our day and feel accomplished is in our DNA. It's hardwired into us.
Yeah.
But the where you get the what I think is true toxic masculinity is when you're like, oh, well, I have to dominate and control those in my life or my spouse, to where my spouse has to serve me to feel like a man. She's got to bring me my food and be the one who cooks all the meals and do all this. Not saying if that's what you want to do in your relationship and your wife wants to be the one to cook all the meals and that's her strong suit and you can't cook worth a hoot, that's fine. But the control and like you said, I'm owed something.
Hmm.
A woman needs to stay home and serve me because I'm the
Yeah.
man and that's how it's supposed to be, is where it goes from, you know, dominance to control and it turns toxic very quick. It's all needs to it's what's your heart in it? Is it this is what me and my partner have agreed to, and it's out of love and empathy, and you know, she wants we've agreed that she's going to be the one to cook, but when she's sick, I have no problem, and I'm not going to control her and make it to where she has to. Or if she's run ragged, I
Yeah.
can go cook dinner and it's not a
Yeah.
problem because, it's not about control. The moment you add control, your own insecurities, your past traumas, it immediately turns toxic, and there's nothing,
Yeah.
there's no way you can twist that to being
No.
masculine. It's
Yeah.
actually like if you are controlled by your fear to where you have to control other people, that's not strength, it's weakness. You cannot try to control everything around you so you don't get hurt and say I'm strong. If you look all throughout history, some of the biggest masculine figures in human history, it has all been men who have run head first
Hmm.
into the hardest things a man could go through and came out on top. None of them were going around being like, I just got to control everything so I feel good. Like that's never, it's been a very recent thing that's a sign of what it is to be a masculine man.
Yeah. And I think, part of this has to also like be from coming from the woman's side as well. I mean, so in a relationship or a marriage, union, whatever, uh, sometimes women are conditioned to think that men have always got to be strong. So the woman can pretty much take from the man, emotional support, physical support, whatever, and then not give back, thinking that the man doesn't need it.
Right.
And this is a vicious cycle because those men may not come out and just say, "Oh, hey, I'm missing, whatever, like intimacy, emotional, support, whatever." That comes out in the form of an aggression. So if you sit around and take from your man and not give back to the man to support him in every way, every way you should, and assume that the man doesn't need it, then you're creating that toxicity within the man, which comes out in different forms, and sometimes you may not know. I mean, like and then it kind of it's a circle. Then the man becomes aggressive, and the woman starts seeing that, and then that drives her away. And this is kind of what usually happens, right? So when you start this cycle, at one point, somewhere along the way, the cycle the union falls apart because no one really understands what's going on. So each person is seeing something happen to them, and then they are reacting in a way that does not tie into what's happening to the person by the other person. Does that make sense? I mean, that needs to be also looked at because it's an important thing because men don't come out and say, and that's I think where having open, honest conversations on about just about anything is really important to keep relationships strong and moving forward. If
Oh,
one
that's
person
what
does it,
being truly vulnerable looks like
correct,
because if
yes, and
you're
they, yeah,
you can't have a super close connected relationship on either side if you are not vulnerable
yeah.
with what you're really going through.
So you
Like
can,
what
yeah, you
like
can see that, right? I mean, yeah, that
absolutely.
ties in.
Hmm.
Everything ties in together. It's like it one leads to the other. I mean, these are all not individual issues stemming from toxic masculinity. It actually comes from different paths, all leading to the same focal point or the same point of explosion or whatever you want to call it. So you're right. I mean, so that has to be that comes only from both parties being able to have that vulnerability and to have the ability to have an honest conversation and trust each other and then try to help each other out because men need help, they need support, uh, not just financial in some cases but physical, mental, all types. They may not come out and say it though because they men tend to isolate the emotions because I mean they think like they can only have one emotion at a time but not as complex as women, but men do have interlocked emotions. I mean, they can have different things going on at the same time, but it may come out as only one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and like we said earlier in the episode, I mean, what anger
Hmm.
is masks somebody's sadness, and especially with men. So if a man has a bad day at work or loses his job or something and or something's going on and he is sad and he doesn't feel like he can express that sadness or he was taught he had to man up and he wasn't allowed to be sad. He wasn't allowed to go home and cry in front of his partner, his spouse. He's what does he do? He gets angry. He's mad.
Yeah.
And that's how he expresses his emotions as he takes it out on those around him. He's just a bitter, angry person. So I think you're absolutely right that, it's essential for a man to have in his significant other a safe space to
Hmm.
express what he's feeling as well.
Yeah.
Because we're all human. We're all human. We're gonna have the bad days. We're gonna have good days. We're gonna have really bad days.
Yeah.
And if you can't be vulnerable with your partner and express those vulnerable emotions that would keep from the workplace, what do you really have at the end of the day? Because it's not a close connected relationship. You're wearing a mask for your spouse, for your partner, and that's not going to get anywhere. It's like it's going to fester and it's going to end up coming to a head at some point in the relationship. It's going to turn into resentment.
Yeah. And the other thing is like men are really good at like bottling, and I can speak for this myself. I mean, like we are able to bottle up our emotions. I mean, we are not just because we were told to do so, but that's normally how we can operate. I mean, because
Hmm.
we can keep it all in and then just lead life as normal. But then at some point, when things get too hard, we may pick an emotion to express from the bottled emotions, and it may be the wrong one,
Right.
right?
And
So
it's all gonna come out in that one.
yeah, so and generally what happens, what I have seen a lot, and again from even from experience, like like you can have like various sadness, not feeling valued. I mean, all these things can be the bottled up emotions, but then they all come out. The easiest emotion for a man to express is anger.
Mhm.
And then you're going to come out and be angry about it. And then, your partner is probably wondering, like, why the hell is he angry? I mean, like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. But
Right,
but
right. The
without
the wind
realizing,
changed direction.
right, without realizing that this is like maybe months, maybe years of
Mhm.
bottling up various different emotions that were never addressed, and maybe at times, and this happens too. I mean, like you try to express your emotions, and if the other person is not open and able to receive it, then you're going to shut down. Right? And this happens to both parties. I mean, women do the same thing, like, and men
Oh
are
yeah.
notorious for not paying attention to what the woman is saying. So, like, we kind of hear part of the story and, like, okay, I think I got it, but then we probably didn't. So then the women shut down. So now you have two people who have emotions that need to be out there in the open, vulnerability expressed, discussion, need to happen, but you're both bottling it in. Right. So now we have a explosive situation. So now that now you're constantly, the aggression is what is seen most of the time because none of those things are getting addressed, and
Right.
that is, and I have seen this a lot. I'm sure you're familiar with what you agree with what I'm talking about, because
Mhm.
it's pretty common in society. I mean, we have friends, we see it. I mean, now that we have social media, I mean, like where
It's
people,
just out there. Everybody can
yeah,
see
people,
everybody puts their
yeah,
garbage out.
people need to, wash their laundry out in public. I mean, which is, fine if that's what they want to do. But I mean, if you watch and listen to what people are saying, very often that's the problem. I mean, they'll blame each other for whatever is going on, but the problem is neither of them have addressed the proper emotion. They're addressing the wrong emotion at that
Or
time.
they're sharing like they even talk about the wrong emotion with each
Yeah,
other. You see this in relationships all the time.
yeah,
It's why you have an anger problem. Why are you so angry? You can't
hmm,
control your anger. Like you're talking about the wrong thing.
yeah,
And at least in my experience, what I have seen, one of the most common things men's pent up anger comes out in is doing like handyman tasks around the house.
yeah,
Like you'll hear a guy yelling at some bolt that won't come
mhm,
off for 30 minutes, cussing out
yeah,
an inanimate object,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's what he's using to take out that bottled up emotion. But still, like if you really want to get down to it, and if a man can really be like, and then you have to, this has to be on both sides. And I know we're
mhm,
talking about
yeah,
masculinity, but both parties have to be willing to be like and mature enough. And this goes back to what I mentioned about what true masculinity
mhm,
is part of that is having emotional intelligence, having the emotional intelligence to know, what are you feeling, what
yeah,
is the root of this? Am I angry? Am I using this anger as a shield for something I'm sad about? Am I trying to control the situation because I'm scared of something? Can I be honest with myself? Once you have that emotional intelligence, then you have the choice to be vulnerable with your partner and be vulnerable with yourself and be able to sit back and reflect. Now, you know what? I'm really sad that I didn't get that promotion at work. I worked so hard for that for the past 5 years and somebody else got it. Like, just I'm sad or I'm scared.
mhm,
I have this thing inside of me that I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's from when I was a kid. But when you said that or did that, I just got scared. Like
yeah,
nobody talks like that anymore in nobody talks about it like that in relationships. Nobody shares that stuff with their partner anymore. The true, raw like expressing that, like being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Just that's just what it is, being truly vulnerable and not and letting somebody see the real you. Most people don't want to even see their real selves. They can't handle it.
Yeah.
The ego can't handle seeing their real selves. And I'm like, if you can have two people that have that emotional intelligence that truly can express their emotions and be vulnerable with each other, that's what a real power couple is right there. It's
Mhm. Which
yeah,
have,
that's connection.
yeah,
That's true connection.
yeah. And I think another, part of that puzzle is the fact that, we have been told that marriages and relationships are a 50-50 affair. So, like, there is now a
Right.
built-in competitiveness to compete within a relationship. Like, who's better. I mean, I don't necessarily say that a little bit of competition is a bad thing, but when it becomes, when it's not healthy, when it's like an unhealthy competitiveness, then, that becomes a problem because now you start playing dirty, right? You,
Or
you,
you're
you
expecting something when it's 50-50 and it turns into transaction.
yeah,
You are expecting something from
mhm,
somebody, and when you don't get it, and nobody is going to be able to give 100 or even 50 at all times throughout the entire relationship. So you're
yeah,
inevitably setting yourself up for disappointment. And how are you going to handle that? Typically, it's not well. You end up
right,
having resentment.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly what happened. So now you want it so bad, and very often relationships are not 50-50. I mean, they're sometimes they're 80-20, sometimes they're 10-90. I mean, like, like the old saying goes, some days you got to be the bird, some days you got to be the statue, right?
Right.
So, you know, you get pooped on some days, and that's fine. That's the way it is. That's how it has to be. And that again, that comes from a societal construct as well as, things that people observe in their own environments or what they hear from friends and family and people. Uh,
Hmm.
but it doesn't work that like that always. So you have to do, like you said, I think the best way is to be, and this word has to be, I think, explained a little better, but the word is presence. I mean, you have to be present in that relationship. Be the man that does what needs to be done, and
Right.
at the same time be, you know, vulnerable to express your emotions, and then not become this angry person that always has to win and feels that they're entitled to something constantly.
Or or that your spouse has to meet every one of your needs. I mean, how what what's what's going to offer more connection and is a better expression of love? Making your spouse go do the dishes or cook dinner when she's had a long day or a long week, or being present and being able to recognize, wow, she's struggling today. I'm just going to go do that. Like how that would make your significant other feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to say, hey, I'm having a rough go at it. Can you tag in? Just the fact that, hey, he's so aware and present in what's going on that he just saw I needed that and went and did it and just said, hey, I got it. I got this.
Mhm.
Go sit down. Go lay down. Go take a nap. Go for a walk. Go do whatever. I mean, that's becoming so rare nowadays because like you said, every we have this weird concept that's supposed to be 50-50. Well, I just worked 8-10 hours and I paid all
Mhm.
the bills and everything. I'm not coming home and doing all this too. That's your
Yeah.
50.
All right.
Like I'm not coming home to poopy diapers and a sink full of dishes and doing all that. I gotta wake up at 6 a.m. for work tomorrow and do my 50 again the next day. Like that's how these conversations go in
Mhm, mhm.
relationships nowadays. And like how does that leave any room for your significant other to feel like she can be vulnerable?
Yeah.
Just like you don't feel safe to express being sad, she doesn't feel safe to be able to express being tired
Mhm.
or overwhelmed. Like, again, then me, like, masculinity in a lot of cases, and not in every case, but I would say a good cheat code rule of thumb, especially when it comes to relationships, if you have two options and one of them feeds your ego and feels good and the other one's difficult, chances are the one that's a little bit harder and more inconvenient is probably the right way to go,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, but nobody wants to be uncomfortable nowadays, and we've been conditioned and taught, and I'm not even saying like most men don't even know because we've been taught the exact opposite. And I would even say in Western culture, religion teaches you that too, that a man's supposed to do this and a woman's supposed to do that. That's also fed and fueled the
Mhm.
feminist movement of feeling like all this unjust crap's thrown on them because some higher being said so. Like it
Yeah.
just, men don't know. And we wonder why relationships are failing. We wonder why the divorce rate is so high now. I mean, even, I'm sorry, and everybody said, well, it's so good in the church. Nah, it's trending in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I don't
Like
think that's true
divorce rates,
anymore.
no, divorce
Yeah.
rates are horrible even in the religious communities and no matter what, whether Christianity I'd say Christianity has one of the worst divorce rates in all the major religions in the world.
Mhm.
So obviously something's not working, and
Yeah.
what we're being taught is a failing system. So maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing.
I think people, I mean, like, this has to be looked at from, like, not just the male side. And I think, this is a joint effort
Mhm.
because the reason why the men are like this today, I mean, the feminist movement and women played a certain role in it as well. And they're not helping. And I see this a lot. I mean, like, and these are sometimes it's not people that I know, so, I just read and move on. But people openly claim that, they're like, the man is like not doing anything. And so, like, their weapon is like they withhold intimacy. And in a
Mm,
relationship, that is the key for a man to feel that he is like wanted, respected, and desired. I mean,
absolutely.
not being desired by their partner is probably the single biggest reason that marriages fail, relationships fail, and that's like definitely the wrong thing to do. So if
Right.
you have not, if you don't have if both parties don't have the level of emotional intelligence to like sit and discuss and talk and figure out what emotions are going on within each other's heads and kind of resolve it, doing that kind of thing will make the man, you know, be more aggressive, and then he feels defeated, he feels, unwanted, and that is like the start of the downhill slide. I've seen this happen to a lot of people. I mean, like, and like you said, I mean, people post their lives online these days, and if you read it, that's you can see that happening. And I don't know where that approach came from because this is definitely not religious. It's some kind of societal construct. Could be from the fact that, I mean, there are certain things glorified in society these days that put a man in a wrong under the wrong light, spotlight. And that can also, like, not motivate the man to do anything better or more because he's going to say, okay, no matter what I do, they're going to just say I'm, a piece of trash anyway, or I'm not going to be valued, or, I'm not, they're going to withhold the very thing that I want most, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So it's a tough place for both men and women, but more men, in this society right now, because they don't have the necessary construct, even in society, to give them the reassurance that it's okay, and that this is how it's supposed to be, and what you're doing is fine or nothing. I mean, like, men don't get that anymore. So I'm not sure, exactly what the solution to this is, but as long as people understand it and they're willing to discuss it and they talk it out, uh, not with just the other person, but even with themselves. I mean, like you said, you need to figure out what is the problem that is bothering, you know, the person to a point where you're now not being the man that you should be. So that's important. And again, like, fathers have a responsibility too, and so do brothers and society and families. And, and I hear this a lot. Like, people have a lot of anger and like anxiety around, woven around their own families or parents, like, coming from parents. I have never seen that. I mean, my generation, I don't think, we saw that a lot or much at all. And I think now
Oh, it's so common now.
it's
It's
very
like
common. I
it's
mean,
normal. Yeah, it's normal. Oh,
yeah,
like people in my generation, it's normal to sit around and just oh, your parents. Oh, well, wait till you hear about my parents. Let's see how bad I had
yeah,
it. And like it's almost like a badge of honor how broken your home
I
was. And
know,
to
I
talk
know.
about that, it's the victim mentality. And I everybody has some form of trauma and
Yeah,
brokenness in their life. And I mean, if you really wanted to make it simple, broken people create broken relationships.
yeah,
No matter what, no matter how you're broken, if you don't one of the first things in the fixing it is realizing you're broken and being able to set aside your
mhm,
ego to say, hey, I'm contributing to the brokenness in this relationship.
mhm,
If you're a man, I think that being a strong man is recognizing your own weaknesses and your own problems and your own need for growth. Because
yeah. I
and
agree.
in my opinion, only a fool would say he's perfect, like,
Yeah,
and in a relationship or just life in general. So being able to sit down and be vulnerable and say, hey, this is where I think I'm messing up. What's your thoughts on this? Is where am I not showing up for you? Where do you where am I not making you feel heard?
mhm,
And approaching it with empathy and wanting to put yourself in the other person's shoes and being like, wow, like you're hurting. Like I've been so selfish sitting here worrying about my own pain and my own hurt that I haven't
yeah,
even cared about yours. And what it's actually really crazy what people don't understand is the moment you can get out of your own shoes and put yourself in somebody else's shoes, especially in a romantic relationship, your own pain, your own insecurities, your own fears, healing will start coming in those when your significant other actually feels heard and safe. Like
yeah,
you will start getting the very things that you are wanting out of the relationship by setting aside your ego and actually having empathy and being kind. If the other person, there's a caveat to it, if the other person is willing to do the same. Because if you have somebody who's just selfish and just gonna take, 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 and take, you can
yeah,
give
yeah. This
until you're
is
blue in the face.
right.
But if both people are willing to be vulnerable with each other and approach it with empathy, you will get some of the very things that you had been craving and desiring in the relationship all along. You just have to swallow that big old ego pill
Yeah, and the pride,
and set
and
aside.
yeah, yeah, and the thing is, sometimes what happens is if you let it go so long, the person is not going to feel safe. Uh, so I mean, like to be vulnerable, you got to feel safe, right? If you're not feeling
Mhm.
safe, you're not going to be vulnerable. So I think part of the solution to the problem is allowing yourself to find a trustworthy source to be vulnerable with, and then kind of
Mhm.
come from that angle, like because you have to get comfortable with it, and understand how to do it, how to approach it, and that's hard too these days. I mean, like I have helped several people like that. I mean, like just in my practice itself, uh, when they have this kind of situation. I mean, like because it comes up in the conversation as part of the emotional health, arena, and so that's very. I have found it's very helpful. I mean, just to be a listening ear. I mean, like just listen and offer support and empathy and sometimes solutions if possible to go on. And not everybody has that. Uh, so if people are in that position, in that situation where you're unable to approach each other because you've had in the past situations where your trust or your safety level is not where it's supposed to be, then find someone who you can uh, have that conversation with, and then like mediate. That works pretty well too, uh, from from a solution standpoint, for a healing standpoint, because that's an important part. And the
I would
other thing I
even,
think what I have noticed in the newer generations is that if you have people who have issues with their parents and you bring these two people together, now there's a foursome of problems, right? Because
yeah.
so the crosstalk can kind of sometimes get in the way as well, because now you may not have the same issues with your parents that you have with your spouse's parents, and vice versa. So it's a complex,
Oh,
societal situation right now, which I think needs to be. You really need emotional intelligence, detachment from the outcomes, like we discussed the last episode, to be able to actually handle it and not let all these, I don't want to use the word attacks, but the distractions or whatever from each side get in the way of you finding that healing safe spot with your own partner, right? That's important, because sometimes parents don't realize this, and there are some parents who didn't, and they may do it through guilt, like because they were not there for them when they were kids, and they all of a sudden wake up and realize the kids are grown up and gone, and now they have their own lives, and now they want to be part of it.
right.
So now they forget the fact that you're part of a family unit yourself, and you have to do that balancing act. I'm not saying totally disregard everybody who's like that, but you have to have boundaries. I mean, that's the word I was looking for. Uh, Healthy boundaries are critical when you're on that path to finding the balance and the recovery.
Oh,
Well, it
absolutely.
looks like
And I,
we've covered another hour.
the
This is an
time
important,
flies.
yeah.
It's an important, an important topic here. And I mean, I'll just, to wrap up, if for men who were brought up that you had to man up instead of feel, like Ravi was saying, not, you don't always have somebody who you can be vulnerable with, and you don't even feel safe being vulnerable. The biggest step, your biggest first step is being vulnerable with yourself and what you're feeling. Once you take that step, you'll be able to, you can start working on that and find somebody that you can actually talk to. But it has to start with yourself. You have to be able to look inward instead of projecting all that pent up emotions and feelings that you never allowed yourself to feel out on everybody else. And that's when you really can start stepping into true masculinity. But, all right, well, appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will talk to you guys on the next one.
All right, looks like we're doing a good job. We don't get any questions, so
Right.
send us your questions if you have any, uh, and we'll be happy to talk about those.
Thanks, everyone.
You guys have a great day. Thanks, Trey.